Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Beyond the Job Title. Today, we have with us Ratnesh Kumar, who works as a product manager. Welcome to the show, Ratnesh.
Hey, thanks, Marmit. You are bringing such a nice episode about different job title. So thank you for bringing on that in the podcast. Nice to be in the part of this.
Sure. Thanks, Ratnesh. Welcome to the show. So, Ratnesh, let's crack on. Could you give us an overview of what product manager role is all about?
Yeah, so product manager is typically a CEO of a particular product or feature, you can say, right? So
Mhm,
there are different type of products. So there are like a hardware type of product which you can think about like an instant pot and those kind of product. Then
mhm,
there are software related product where you can think about Zoom and other kind of software where you are developing a new feature for a customer or user.
mm,
Then there are backend type of product where you are working on an infrastructure product. So you can think about AWS and those kind of stuff. So there are
mm,
multiple variety of product and you can be working on a different industry. For example, you can working on a travel, you can working on e-commerce. So there
mhm,
are multiple dimension to product. But the overarching feature of a product manager, he's trying to understand the customer empathy. So
mhm.
what customer actually needs are, and then trying to solve using technology sometime different type of scenario. And in a regular interval of your times as well, like whenever you are doing some problem solving, it is basically think that's how the product manager think about.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for giving us that overview. So, Ratnesh, what has been your personal journey in choosing or becoming a product manager? Could you provide an overview of what steps did you take towards becoming a product manager?
Yeah, so after my engineering, right, so I was working in like uh, a firm called Ericsson where I was a network engineer. So I was trying to like develop all this network kind of infrastructure and trying to solve that problem. But
Mm,
there, what I lacked is like I wanted to go towards a more business driven problem, like trying to understand what the business are and those kind of scenario.
mm,
So, like as you know, right, like when you don't know anything, then you do MBA. So that's what I charted into as well. Like I went into doing my MBA, done MBA, and then did an internship at Flipkart in my MBA times,
nice.
right? And that
Mm,
Flipkart in it was in 2013, and Flipkart was just growing up, like it was trying to, and I was part of like a growth and a strategy team where I
mhm.
was trying to develop like how much warehousing capacity Flipkart need if they want to hit a $1 billion
Wow.
of GMB.
Okay.
So
Mhm,
that was a pretty interesting project. Like I, when I worked into that, that was like, okay, you are doing something where you have like a lot of business focus, as
mm,
well as trying to like work with a lot of technology type of team, which I like problem solving. And it was a very ambiguous type of spot problems you are posed to. Like the
mhm,
problem I was posed to in the Flipkart was like, how do you do like single day delivery, which is now becomes like a norm, but that time it
mhm,
was not there, right? How do
mhm,
you do single day delivery to 95% of zip code? That was the problem statement. And then you try to like diverse and go deeper. And that's where I thought, no, this is a good space where like you have multiple dimension of like trying to solve a problem, trying to get into data, trying to understand
mm,
business high level picture, and then
mhm.
work with different cross functional team to make it live. That's where the spark for product manager then only, like I think in the Flipkart when I got that, okay, this is a right field to choose. Then I end up like taking a job in Amazon after my campus and then worked for Amazon for around 7.5 years before I joined a startup called Heyday right now. They are also trying to build something on like how do you make a digital brand using a digital first approach. But that's how like I got to understand this is what I want to do. And I have worked for like 7, 8 years in the product space right now, and it is quite good, interesting projects you come across. You can like diversify yourself into different mm, uh, domain, and
Mhm.
like you can work on e-commerce. I have worked on like, for example, I have worked on Amazon search, then I have worked on digital product like Prime, Kindle, and those kind of stuff. Then I went into advertisement, and then right now I'm trying to build a platform for brands. So you can like diversify quite cleanly because products are like, yeah, you need to just understand what the customer problem you're trying to solve and get deeper into that field.
Thanks, Ratnesh. It's really good to understand the diversity of different kinds of projects a product manager can work on.
Yeah.
Okay. So, tell me something. If you did an MBA and then uh, decided to get into product management based on your internship and your interest, if somebody is starting afresh, what could be a possible career path for them to get into product management? Do they necessarily need to do an MBA, or there is other way out to get into product management?
There are multiple ways you can do and
Mm-hmm.
like get into MBA. Some paths short circuits the time, right? Like if you do MBA, it short circuit your path to go to product
Mm-hmm.
because most of the job description will ask you should have an MBA or a business acumen. So like
Mm-hmm.
these are the skill set you require for product, right? You should have a very good business acumen. You should be very good at a data, like understanding data, solving problem using data. Then you should be able to handle ambiguity pretty cleanly. Like if you have, it is not a job where set of defined criteria is given, but it is most ambiguous problem on the fly you have to solve, right? And then you need to work with like different stakeholder. Like there are projects I have worked on where you have like 100 of stakeholder. How do you manage those kind of product, right? So these are like a major ones. So what happens when you do MBA? Some are ticked automatically, like you have a business acumen, you are good in data, those kind of
Mm-hmm.
get ticked automatically, and path become easier to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But but that's not the only case, right? If you are also in engineer, then at least your technical skills, your data skills get ticked, and you have worked on like a cross-functional team, then your stakeholder management also get a tick. All you have to gather at that point of time is how do you go to the business side, right? Try to understand business, work on some problem in a, if your company allows an inter movement, then
Mm-hmm.
that is another way you can go into like understand this business and then get into product. That's another way you can do. You can also, if you, even if you are not like an engineering or any background, you can still get into product. You have to do certain understanding of like how the product manager works. You do some side course. There are like a lot of courses now related to product. You can
Mm-hmm.
do that and try to work on some internship which you can like get into and try to get into product manager. Start with like a junior assistant product manager and try to get there. Then one other path you have is like you can go to business analyst first, right? So you go to business analyst. There you have like multiple check mark, like you have a business understanding, you have a data understanding and stakeholder management, and then try to move that. So there are like multiple paths you can pursue if you want to get into product. But yeah, not MBA, not MBA is not the only limiting field, but it just short circuit the path to get to like a leadership position quicker.
Sure, sure, understand. So, Ratnesh, if we now try to understand a day in your shoes, a day in the shoes of a product manager, could you provide us an overview? How does your typical day start? What kind of activities or tasks a product manager is required to perform?
Yeah, so if you are working on a product where like right now what I'm working on is a product which is live already, like people are using that product. So typically day I'll start is like just making sure all the metrics are under control. When I say under control, we have like some threshold saying, okay, at least you have like a no failure for 99% success for most of the calls which are made on the site or
Mm,
blah, blah, blah. So there are like metrics which I look into and see nothing breaks. If there are anything which is breaking, then you start figuring out whether either how critical is that bug and or things like that. So you look at a high level metrics. So that's the thing you start.
mm,
Then you go into figuring out like what is your so we work in a sprint kind of mental model where you have
mm,
every 2 weeks some releases, right? Either it
mm,
could be customer facing release or it could be internal release. So I try to understand like how is the sprint going on? Is there any blocker somebody is facing? Is there any input which is required from my side, right? So like these are like feature or product which engineers are working and trying to understand everything is going smoothly. So I just try to see is there any problem in this sprint. If
mm,
that is also tick mark, then I start to think through in terms of what are the backlogs I have and then try to see like which one we need to prioritize next in the next upcoming sprint. And if there are any ambiguity, then I try to solve that ambiguity using like doing different meetings with different stakeholders, trying to understand how do we solve this problem, working with couple of them. So we will have couple of meetings in them to just understand what is upcoming one, is there any ambiguity. Then finally, I think when like everything is going on smoothly, then also you think about like what is your next roadmap look like, what are the features you are want to bring, and then try to deep dive into some of these area, trying to understand like what is the big picture or think idea you need to get into. So these are like mix of some of like day-to-day nuances you need to deal
Mm-hmm.
with, and then some strategic thinking in terms of what to bring next, as well as trying to understand when you want to have a leadership review in terms of understanding and those kind of stuff. So yeah, that's how a typical day looks like.
Looks quite intense.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So, Ratnesh, if I have to ask you, what are some of the things you enjoy the most in your role, and what kind of challenges you face, or anything you dislike about the role? What would you answer?
Yeah, so I think it depends on like person to person, but what I kind of enjoy is dealing with ambiguity. So like it is a very ambiguous. I typically tend to take a project which are pretty ambiguous. Like either it is very new, you are doing a 0 to 1 type of stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
in product world, 0 to 1 is pretty common where you are building grounds up, right? Any product or feature which is not there, or you are building something where you just know customer problem and you don't know how to solve that. So dealing with ambiguity is I think the most thing I enjoy. And then there are something which comes naturally to me, like I'm very good at data, understanding data and those kind of stuff. So that I also like I enjoy in terms of like how do you solve using this data. The second most thing which I enjoy the most is like there are a lot of scenario where you will struggle to get any data, right? Like you take a
Mm-hmm.
decision based on like either you run some experiment with a limited set of experiment, or you need to take some judgment call saying, okay, this is what we want to do and see how that how performs. And you to align all the people who are behind you to say, okay, if it is fails, we know that we have taken some instinct plus some data backing to get there, right? So I think dealing with ambiguity, dealing with problem where you don't have a lot of data and doing experimentation is what I enjoy the most of our product, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a product manager. What it becomes like a challenging is dealing with stakeholders, right? It becomes very, very challenging in product because I have worked on a project where it was crossing geographies, right? Like you have a product which is US, India, China, those kind of stuff together, and then trying to deal with like a lot of people in that product because the thing you are developing can break a lot of downstream systems, right? So you have to
Mm-hmm.
be very careful in terms of how do you plan that. So sometimes firefighting becomes like one of the critical, which will suck a lot amount of your time, and then you need to say, okay, just stop and start thinking, taking step back and start thinking, okay, whether we are going the right path or not, right? Because it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of moving pieces, which sometimes become very, very challenging.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. So, in terms of the skill set spectrum for the role, I think you've already touched upon it. Data analysis, dealing with ambiguity. Are there any few others which you would like to highlight? Or?
Yeah, the customer empathy is the one I've not touched into. Like customer empathy is what you should be very comfortable at, right? Understanding you want to solve some customer problem,
Mm-hmm.
as well as trying to understand not from like you think that way, but how is your customer thinking. Simple example, right? In a e-commerce world, you can think that okay, there is a search bar and people go and search there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start thinking about users, there are like a lot of different user persona. There are people who don't know that, okay, you have for searching, you need to go to that bar and type something, right? Like those are the kind of scenario you will face into. You're trying to not think from your head is like one
Mm-hmm.
of the challenge in product management, trying to think, okay, there are customers who are not like that much tech savvy, right? How do you solve that problem? There are customers who are like, who have um, uh, who have some kind of problem which is inhibiting them to like perform. Like there are like a lot of work I have done where you are trying to get to a place where you can have this product which is like used by all, like all disability or whatever, like those kind of stuff as well. So you're trying to think not from one user persona like you yourself, but taking into consideration a lot of different personas.
Mm.
So that I think customer empathy is one of the skill you need to nurture as you go into product. And
I,
then the other you rightly called out, you should be very good at data. You should have an understanding of business. Then you should be like very good in like communicating. I think another one I will add as well is managing your up like a leadership, right? Like how do you manage leadership? Because that communication is pretty different than how you will
mm,
communicate to your engineering team, right? Like those are like something you need to balance out in terms of you are giving a crisp communication to your leadership, where in engineering you need to go down into their shoes and try to develop. So those are like some of the nuances in product which the skill set you need to create.
Thanks, Ratnesh, for sharing that. I would like to probe further on this aspect of empathy. How does one develop an empathy or an understanding of their customer? Are there any some tips you would like to share?
There are multiple ways you can start developing that empathy, right? Like you one when you start working on a product, like doing a user related experiment is one of the way you can start thinking about empathy. There are a lot of questionnaire. That's why you will see like a lot of time there are a lot of questionnaire which are like posted here and there to just try to understand what are different user, how they are
Mm,
giving that reply, and based on that you start to develop like, and then talking. I think talking and discussing with different type of people. Like one is like the circle of people you know, but there are like a lot of other people where you might not understand. So those are like ways you can develop your user empathy and trying to understand as many as persona you can get and classify them. Okay, these are like similar set of people, and you will
mm,
get similar set of replies. But yeah, that's how you develop it.
sure, I understand. So moving on, Ratnesh, if I ask you in terms of an advice which you might have received in your career journey, which helped you a lot, do you recollect any?
Yeah, I was like, one of my manager told me like he is in the product management. I joined, I think, directly from campus, and
Yeah.
he's still my mentor. His name is Rahul, so he's pretty good. He told me in product always stay curious and always learn. Right, that's the way to go
Mhm.
forward, because that's how you develop all this. And that gave me an understanding of like whenever, like that's why I diversified multiple domain, because you can, if you have an learning capability to go deeper into some field, you can go really quick. And then product management is a skill which you just apply there, right? So I think always try to learn, stay curious in terms of what's happening. That is like very best advice I got from one of my mentors.
Sure.
And always apply and try to learn, like always be in top of like what are the trends which are going on in the market, how do you apply those, and try to learn from a small thing.
Sure. And if there is one advice you would like to give the viewers or anybody aspiring to be a product manager or any generic advice, what would that
I will say if anybody want to go to the product, I think it become like a field which is like a lot of people want to. It become hotter these days
be?
in
Hmm.
terms of product, right? Like one advice I will give to all the viewers in terms of, you need to always on top of like uh, the trends in a particular domain which
Hmm.
you get into, and get a habit of like learning quickly and get there quicker, rather than like, yeah, you don't go too deep as well as don't be very shallow, right? You have to find a right balance in these areas.
Sure. In terms of quickly getting an understanding of the trends or about the product, do you recommend any readings or any forums which someone should
There
go?
are a lot of forums, and those are like very specific to like industry you
Mhm.
want to get into. And there are a lot of podcasts as well where you can be very good in terms of finding out like what is going on in a trend. So once you figure out your industry, then try to at least have like a 2 or 3 subscription for those, and then try to see like what's going on and whether is anything related to your product and those kind of stuff as well. So lot of reading, I will say, and a lot of like understanding of what's going on currently in that particular space will help you a tremendous than other product manager. It will ease you out in the competition of this product management overall.
Sure. Thanks, Ratnesh. So, Ratnesh, moving on, if we try to understand what does the future look like for product management roles, what are sort of growth opportunities? Could you shed some light on that, please?
Yeah, so I think uh, the future in the product area is like is growing
Mhm.
rapidly in my opinion, is because like there are a lot of tech company which are coming up where you require not only to understand like how do you solve a tech, but also how do you bring business and tech together, and that's where the product comes in, right? And that's why like the growth in this sector has picked up quite rapidly,
Mhm.
both both ways. In like in the US I've worked on, and also in India as well, like both the places, like understanding of the product management role has become like a one thing which is growing currently. And with the growth on AI and ML as well, like there are like a lot of product role which are
Mm.
related to like an AI and ML, where people are not only trying to solve using LLM, but also trying to understand whether the customer needs are, like whether customer needs, what actually customer needs are, and you solve using this. So product management will grow in this area of AI and ML very rapidly, because you need somebody to see like what the strategy look like, what you want to give it to in user, and then trying to understand, okay, this is the exact problem the user have, and you're trying to solve that as well.
Sure. Thanks. And coming to the last question of the episode, how do you balance work life with product management role? How challenging is the role? Do you get enough time to pursue your hobbies or balance the work life?
Yeah, it is a little challenging in terms of like time management, right, in the product, because like you are owning a product
Hmm.
which breeds, and which breeds because of you, right? Like you are the owner of the product. So if anything goes wrong, you will be the first person to question like what is going wrong. So that's why it becomes like a challenging one where you are like doing that. To
Hmm.
manage, I think what I have found out is like you start to get into time management much better. And
Hmm.
if you do that, then you will have like good amount of time to do like a lot of your hobbies you want to do. Like not trying to get lost in terms of okay, going such a deeper, and then you understand okay, this is not required at all kind of
Hmm.
mental model. So I think management become a key, which I have learned through my experiences. Like initial year of my product, I have worked like 12, 14 hours like every day kind of mental
Hmm.
model. When
Hmm.
currently I am like with the time set like 8 to 10 hours, I'm able to complete what is required. So finding that right balance, like how do you do a time management much better, and don't waste a lot amount of time in your office hours, will give you a lot amount of time to pursue your hobbies. And I do like a lot of hobbies, like I have a gardening in my backyard which I do like pretty
Hmm.
religiously. And then I do like a lot of other reading and a lot of other hobbies. Like I'm also trying to like get into private level kind of stuff as well. So like there are like a lot of things you can pursue if you do right kind of time management.
Thank you so much, Ratnesh. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights.
Thank you, Manvit. It was nice talking to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.